Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. My mother passed away in an accident when I was 19. My father and I were devastated. She was the glue that held us together. She was an artist and the light of our lives. I was in college when I found out about my mom, and after her funeral, I could never really come back. The idea of being in our home without her there was unbearable. I worked on internships and projects during all my breaks and spent my holidays with my friends. I was barely in contact with my dad, calling or texting once or twice every few months at max. 4 years after my mom's passing, my father called me one day and said that he was getting married again. He wanted me to be there at the wedding, but I told him that I was genuinely happy for him, but couldn't be there. He said he understood and tried to assure me that no one could ever take mom's place. We shared a moment of love for my mom, and I wished him all the best for his new life. I didn't know much about my stepmom. I only saw her in a picture that my dad sent of the two of them. She looked young, college student young. Dad was around 48 at the time of their wedding, and I remember being a little creeped out by that. I guess I've always felt a little guilty about distancing myself from him, but the memory of my beautiful mother and her sudden death is just too painful. If I knew back then what was going to happen, I'd have kept him so close to me. But we'll get to that in a bit. Anyway, years go by. My dad and I still remained in contact through the occasional phone call or text. I only visited him and my stepmom once after their wedding when I was in town for some work-related thing. I can't remember right now. I think it was around 3 years after the wedding when I got a great job offer in Australia. The pay was great, and it was not like I had any commitments back home, so I decided to take it up. I called my dad to let him know, and we met one last time. I wish I had spoken to him longer than I did that day because that was the last time I ever saw him. But I was excited about his new life, and he was genuinely happy with my stepmother, so I did not think much of it and parted ways. Flash forward, I moved to Australia. Quite the adjustment period, but eventually I settled down quite well. I was 27 at the time. I stayed in Australia for around 15 years before deciding that I want to be back in the States. My dad and I were barely in contact during my time in Australia. We texted each other once in a while, and that was it. 12 years into my stay in Australia, my father passed away due to COVID complications. Lockdowns were in place during that time, and I couldn't make it to the funeral. It absolutely broke my heart. I regret not spending time with him or being closer to him, but life works in unexpected ways. I recently came back to the States and settled in Seattle. I decided to visit my dad's home and pay my respects at his grave once I had settled in a little. I also thought it would be a nice little surprise for my stepmother. We had talked on the phone when Dad passed away, but after that, we hadn't spoken at all. I rang the doorbell, not knowing what to expect. I didn't think she would recognize me because she had seen me only once apart from pictures. And I'm not on social media either, so she must not have known how I look now. When she opened the door, even I barely recognized her. From her expression, I could tell that she didn't recognize me either. I said hello, introduced myself, said I hoped she was doing well, and apologized for showing up without warning, asked if Dad was in. She looked like she had seen a ghost. After staring blankly at me for a bit, she asked who I really was. I laughed and said I'm her stepson and I'm finally back from Australia. More intense staring, and she asked if this was some sort of sick joke. I was just confused at that point and asked her what she meant. She said her stepson had returned already and was living in Seattle, and she didn't know who I was. She told me not to harass her with twisted practical jokes and asked me to leave before she calls the police. I thought she had lost her mind. I asked if she was playing some sort of joke. I told her to stop joking around. She lost it and said that I should stop disrespecting her and slammed the door on my face. I am just utterly confused. Has she lost her mind? I had planned on maybe seeing my dad's old office and then visiting his grave and leaving the next day. But now I'm questioning everything. I was not in touch with anyone in my extended family. All my friends in the US are in Michigan, where I went to college and worked. They didn't know about anything in my hometown, so I don't know whom to reach out to. At this point, I have decided to visit the town bar. My dad was never a big drinker, but he often used to go there to meet his old pals. Maybe that can give me some insights. My stepmom is not only terrifyingly selfish and scheming, she's also stupid. Wow, what I discovered at the bar has officially left me questioning my existence. I went in and understandably, no one recognized me. I didn't even remember when I went there last. I went to the bar and asked the bartender if he knew my dad. He said, of course he does. He spoke a little about how everyone at the bar missed him. He then asked me how I knew my dad. I then introduced myself and he looked a bit weirded out. I showed him an old picture of Dad and I. I don't look the same at all, but it was clear that I am the same person in the picture. The bartender then asked if I had any brother or stepbrother that he didn't know of. I said that I was my dad's only son. That was when I found out about my stepmom's psychotic plan. The bartender told me that no one could attend my dad's funeral except my stepmom because of the pandemic. But after things were normal, she held a service. The interesting thing is that apparently at the service, she introduced a man as me and he gave a speech. He had apparently seen that guy around a few times after that. What was even happening? It felt like I was inside some weird dream at that point. I asked the bartender not to tell anyone about this until I had figured this thing out, and he assured me that he won't. But I knew that this was going to be the town gossip in no time, so I had to work fast. The first thing I did was find a local lawyer and explain the situation. That guy hardly believed me and probably thought I was crazy. I pulled up some documents that proved my identity beyond any doubt and told him this was urgent. He agreed to pay a visit to my stepmom, but that will be 2 days later. Today I waited in the car as my lawyer went up to the house. As expected, he opened up my door. My lawyer told her that I have all the documents that can prove my identity and that we are suing her for identity theft and fraud. He implied that we had found whoever she had gotten to impersonate me and that he had agreed to be a witness against her. Some more legal jargon, and she started to look panicked. This was when I went up to her. I told her if she comes clean, we don't need to get the law involved. I dialed 911 on my phone and told her she had 2 minutes to make a choice. She finally caved in. I've been living in a cloud of disbelief ever since, but this is what she told me. After my dad passed away, she found out that their house had been left to me. This is because that house was inherited by my mom from her parents, who left it to their grandchild in their will so that it always stays in their family. Oh, I should also mention that the house has quite a lot of fairly valuable art and collectibles that were purchased by my mom. I think my dad forgot to ever mention it to my stepmom. When she found out about this after Dad had passed away, she came up with this crazy plan. She thought that since I'm in Australia and with the pandemic in full motion, she could scam her way into the will. She got a distant cousin of hers to impersonate me and presented him to the lawyers. That guy then told the lawyers that he's okay with my stepmom living in the house. For the last 3 years, they have been living this lie. My stepmom assumed that I would never come back to the States because initially that was my plan. I'm taking all legal actions, though. This is a clear case of financial fraud and identity theft. I honestly don't know why she chose to do this. If she had chosen to tell me everything, I probably would have agreed to sell her the house and assets at a bare minimum price. But now that she has chosen to do this, I won't spare her. My DMs are getting absolutely flooded with people asking me for updates. I've also gotten questions about how old she is. She married my dad when she was just 22. You all can do the math now. It's been 3 months and the trial has started. We have tracked down the guy who was pretending to be me. My stepmom even made him dye his hair so that he resembles my dad. We have quite distinctive red hair. We have also found out that she has already sold some of the valuables in the house which were rightfully mine. As far as the legal proceedings are going, it's quite complicated. Her lawyers are arguing that she is not of sound mind, which made things more complicated. But my lawyers are determined that we will win the case. It is getting expensive, but I don't mind. When I eventually win, I know the art and some vintage furniture in the house will help me balance out the expenses with little to no effort. OP, may I suggest that your stepmom may actually be crazy? How else can you justify all the things she has done? Either way, I'm so glad you found out about her plot before she got rid of all the things your mom collected. People never fail to bewilder me. I think she just married your dad for a lifetime of financial stability, and when that was taken from her, she came up with this plan to rip you off. I hope the judge gives her hell for all she has done. Today was my wife's, Anna's, birthday, and we were hanging out with some family, including my brother David, his fiancee Alice, and my wife's Aunt Rachel, and little cousin Katie. As some backstory, Anna suggested that for Christmas we would get Katie an experience as a gift, basically tickets to something she wanted to do. I said, sure, whatever. We cleared it with Rachel, who said yes. Back to this evening, as we were eating, Anna told Katie to tell me what he's doing in a couple of months. What? I asked. I was told that we were taking her to see Hairspray. I was upset because I know how expensive shows are, and Anna didn't discuss that as an option with me, but didn't say anything. Later, Anna made some comment about she's not drinking right now, kind of out of the blue. As some more backstory, we are trying to have kids. She's told 4 groups of people so far. Her parents, my best friend, one of her friends, and her best friend. At no point has she asked me if I feel comfortable with her telling everyone. And quite honestly, every time she does it, she can tell it makes me uncomfortable. She's even made comments about how embarrassed I look a few of the times. I've also expressed discomfort at telling people at least once, but she continues to do so. IMO, having kids is a deeply personal choice, and so is the decision about whether or not to tell people you are. I feel as though she's robbed me of having any input in the second decision. So when she made that comment in front of my family, I was upset about this too, because I know she wanted them to ask why, so she could tell them. Luckily for me, David and Alice were oblivious. Another thing was that after Katie and Rachel left, she made a comment about how she was going to use Katie to drag me to more musicals. I loathe musicals, but Anna loves them. After I finished buying the tickets, she could tell I was upset and asked me why. I explained it to her. She immediately got defensive. From her point of view, we only spent $35 on Katie. I explained to her that no, we essentially spent $150 on Katie because we wouldn't be buying hairspray tickets for ourselves if it wasn't Katie's gift. Her argument for telling people about us trying to have kids without talking to me first is that it's her body. Sure, that's true, but that doesn't take away from the fact that having kids and telling people you are trying are both deeply personal decisions, and she didn't factor my comfort level into the decision to broadcast it. It feels like an abject lack of respect for my wishes. She claimed I was an a-hole and that I ruined her night. The problem is neither of you communicate well with each other. For the niece's gift, she suggested an experience gift, and you blew it off by saying, sure, whatever. Sounds to me like you didn't care. You should have said, sure, do you have any ideas? I'd like to keep the cost under X amount of dollars. She should have told you when she decided on the musical so you could discuss it. For the baby issue, I get that you feel a way about it. Your wife also feels a way about it, and right or wrong, women usually bear the brunt of fertility issues. She probably needs support from family and friends, but she should take your feelings into account since you're uncomfortable with it. A good compromise would be she shares with her closest relatives and best friend, but no one else. I'm going to say ESH since you both need to work on communication. YTA. She gets to tell people if you guys are trying for kids, and so do you. If you don't want to talk with others about it, great. But your lives aren't lived in a vacuum. She has other people she'll want to talk about this with and should be able to talk about it with. Also, with her comment about not drinking, you assumed her intention and let your assumption sour your mood, not anything she actually did. You also agreed to buying your niece an experience. She should have talked to you about it. But IMO, $150 for something your wife and niece will enjoy and have fond memory of for years to come, isn't that steep of a price to pay? And if she loves musicals, for the love of God, go see some musicals with her. Just like how you want her to take an interest and support things you like. My fiance, 26 male, and myself, 26 female, just had our baby 9 months ago. We are still adjusting to new parents' life and being newly engaged. My fiance's father, in the 7 years I've known him, has always treated my fiance as a ATM. Even though we are not financially stable enough to lend money, we somehow always end up assisting him. For some context, my future father-in-law works in timeshare and is hugely commissioned based, and he does not sell very well, so every check he gets is less than $20. He's been kicked out of the house and it foreclosed in 2020. The house he kept in terrible shape. I'm talking dog shit ingrained in the carpets, moldy smell, bathroom floors are slimy, and smell of urine, just to name a few things. He constantly has fallouts with my fiance, and at one point I had to get in between them to diffuse a situation that almost turned physical. He is currently living in a motel because none of his 3 adult children want to take him in for all the reasons I've mentioned, and then some. He has recently reached out to ask for money to pay his rent yet again. I told my fiance absolutely not because a couple of months ago he stole my fiance's card and tried to pay his rent with it after we already said no. So naturally, I'm through helping him. He is on a week-to-week basis in his motel. His girlfriend paid his rent this week, luckily, but I know we will encounter the same issue next week until he's homeless. When he becomes homeless, I do not want him to live here because I know he will never leave, and I like my space. I don't feel like I should have to live with my 62-year-old father-in-law. However, None of his other children will let him live with them. I told my fiance I don't care if he lives out of his van, but he did not like that very much, but I'm willing to give an ultimatum. It's me or him, so am I the a-hole? NTA, your fiance is being manipulated. He needs to grow up and decide what is more important. If you had told me father-in-law was an amazing man who you loved and respected, but was down on his luck, I'd say you are the A. But that's not the case. You have a child to raise. Your first priority is your child. Every time your fiance gives money to his dad, it takes away from your child. That's not okay. What happens if there is an emergency? Do you have $1,000 back if the car breaks down? Or if your roof needs replaced? What happens if one of you loses your job? Do you have savings to float you until you find a new job? What happens if the electric bill is double next month? Can you cover it? Now stop and think in the past 18 months, entire pregnancy and baby's life, how much money has fiance given father-in-law? Would that amount cover any of these expenses? NTA, I think your decision is wise. Otherwise, your fiance will be supporting him until he dies. If your fiance can't see that his father will not take care of himself, then it is best you skip the years of misery that are ahead. It has to be his decision, not one forced on him. He has to see it himself. Otherwise, he will blame you for everything that happens to his father. Tell him to go live with his father in the motel. Maybe this will open up his eyes that adults don't keep jobs that pay $20 a pay period. NTA. I know people who have relatives move in and they won't leave. They stay with family and go on vacations, go to the bars, save nothing to move out on their own because they are comfortable. Sponging on relatives is easier than making it on your own. It sounds like your father-in-law needs a career change. Minimum wage has gone up, so he could make a lot more doing a min wage job. I would rather give someone money than have someone move in. My home is a sanctuary where I can relax and be at peace. I can run around in a nightshirt or a towel. Having someone else here would change that. It changes the atmosphere in your home.